So let's go back in time. It's September 1997, and I am a 16-year-old going into a new school for grade 11. My new school is the Collegiate at the University of Winnipeg, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and at the time it only had students in grade 11 and 12. So everybody else in grade 11 was also new, just like myself. And I didn't know anybody going into the school, but as it's Winnipeg and it's a pretty small community, I recognized a handful of people. There was somebody that I went to synagogue with and somebody I knew I recognized from the water polo community, and then there was Hillary. And Hillary had taken driver's ed with me several months before. We'd never met, never chatted. I was 16, never had a girlfriend before, didn't really have any confidence, and I certainly wasn't going to talk to a girl I thought was particularly cute, and Hillary was really cute. Apologies to my beautiful wife Ratna, who won the prize earlier on. She's heard this before. As it turns out, she was in my first class with me, and our eyes connected, but we never really chatted then. But the next day at lunch, I had an opportunity to sit down at the same table with her. We had some communal friends, and we sat down and got a chance to meet. And we hit it off right off the bat. Right off the bat, we had a lot in common, and we really got along. And so the next few lunches, we spent time together, up until the first Friday of school. And the first Friday of school, we had lunch together, and then later on that afternoon, at afternoon break, we ran into each other in the locker room, and she mentioned to me how she wasn't feeling very well, and she wasn't really looking forward to the bus ride back to her car. She lived outside the city, would drive in to her friend's place, and then they'd take a bus from the River Grove area, North Main, to get into the school, because parking downtown is pretty expensive. And she mentioned she wasn't looking forward to the bus ride home. But she knew that I had a car there because I carpooled with my mom and I parked not very far away. And so she asked me, "Oh, I'm not feeling very well. Would you mind giving me a ride home?" And I thought, wow, 16 years old, never had a girlfriend, first week at a new school, and now this girl I've been crushing on for months wants me to drive her home? This is like the greatest thing to ever happen to me. Amazing. Right? So I probably tried to act cool and probably said, "Well, yeah, okay," or something like that. I ended up skipping a class to go do this. I thought I had plenty of time. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon, and I had to pick up my mom from work, who I carpooled with, but she wasn't done until about 4 o'clock. So I thought I had plenty of time to drive there and drive back. Shouldn't be an issue whatsoever. So we walked over to the car, and it was my mom's car. It was a beige Ford Tempo, not to be confused with the white Ford Taurus that I accidentally stole, for those of you who saw my other show. And we got in. Now, of course, this isn't a romantic story. It's lighthearted, funny, and it's a little bit about the worst possible events that could happen to somebody, a 16-year-old boy trying to, maybe get a girl's phone number at some point. So we got in the car, and I put the key in the ignition, and right off the bat, our first problem, the car would not start. No, yeah, I know. Put yourself in a 16-year-old boy's shoes. You're sitting in the car with the girl of your dreams, maybe, at 16, and the car wouldn't start. I didn't think I could possibly be so embarrassed in my entire life. As it turns out, later this afternoon, I'd be significantly more embarrassed. So I apologized profusely. I told her I'm sorry, but maybe my aunt is at home where I parked the car. Maybe she has jumper cables that we can borrow. And so I walked around to the front of the house, and conveniently enough, before I even got a chance to get to the door, my grandfather pulled up. And it was kind of unusual. My grandmother had previously lived in this house, but she'd passed away a few years before, and her and my grandfather divorced when my mom was a kid. My grandfather still stayed close to the family, so he would visit periodically, but for him to pull up at the right time to this house was really unusual. So I flagged him down, asked him to come around back, and of course he offered to help, always prepared, had a set of jumper cables in his trunk, so he boosted the car. And I went and I thanked him profusely, and he gave me a big hug, and he said, he wished me luck, and it was really special because it was one of the last hugs we ever gave to each other. He passed away about 6 weeks later, but he was always in the right time at the right place for me. So we got in the car was starting, and we're off, and I'm excited, and suddenly I'm feeling a little more at ease. What else could possibly happen, right? Car stall, all good. So we're driving down York, going towards Main Street, and she mentions offhand as a joke, "Oh, I hope you don't stall the car." And the joke, rolled off me. I thought it was funny because it's an automatic, right? So you can't stall an automatic. But Of course, the car had been stalling periodically. It had an issue that we hadn't had properly addressed. So of course, we get to the corner of York and Main, right before rush hour. It is now shortly after 3 o'clock, and the car stalls in the far left lane at a red light. Hopefully, the battery's charged itself enough that I can restart the car, and no, of course not. And this is, of course, before cell phones were ubiquitous, so I had to contact somebody about this, so I needed a payphone. Now, conveniently enough, there's a payphone right outside of my car door, literally 1.5 meters away, and it's actually still there, one of the few payphones left right at the corner of York and Main. I have not seen anybody use it in 20 years, but it was there when I needed it. So I went out to the payphone, I don't know, quarter, so I gotta go back to the car, and I've gotta ask Hillary if she has a quarter. I apologize, I don't think I said her name. Her name was Hillary. So she lent me a quarter. Now I borrowed a quarter from this girl. She's met my grandfather already now. And I call up my mother, and I tell her the story, and she works only a few blocks away. She said she'll call my father, and we'll make arrangements, and I'll be taken care of. So she called my father. We just sat there blocking traffic for a good half hour or so until my father pulls up. He's picked up my mom at her office, and people pulled up, set up the jumper cables really quick, and the car's still not starting. It's not just the battery, it's also the alternator in the car is not going to start, so we need to do something about that. So my dad pulls around behind us and he pushes us bumper to bumper into what is now the girls' parking lot. Back then it was just a gravel lot, and we leave the car. And so Hillary and I get our stuff out of this car, and we get into my dad's car, and now this girl that I've known for 3 or 4 days, who I have a big crush on, has now met my parents, and is now in a car with me and my parents. And my dad drops a little bit of a bomb on us. He says, oh, unfortunately, we can't take her right back to her car. I've got to go do a sales call. He was a carpet salesperson, and he was late now to a call because he had to pick us up. So drove to a house in the North End, and he got out of the car, and now, even worse, I'm alone in a car with my crush and my mother. 15 minutes. Could have been much worse, but of course at the time, like I'm sure that there are many 16-year-old boys out there, that this is the worst nightmare possible. Wasn't that bad. My father got back in the car, and when he got back in the car, he dropped another bomb on us. He said, well, it's Friday, your mom and I are going to go out to the cottage, so we need to pack, we need to get ready, so you're going to have to take us home, and then you can take the car and drive her home. At the time, I thought this is insane, but looking back, I think that my parents actually probably wanted to give us a little bit of chance to be alone, so I really appreciate that looking back. But so we drive to my parents' place, and now my girl that I've been crushing on has met my parents, my grandfather. Now she's seen my house after knowing each other for 3 or 4 days. And so drop off my parents, and just as I drop off my parents, we start to go, and it starts to rain a little bit, and this comes down a little bit harder. And so we're in the Maples, we drive all the way down Jefferson to get to Main Street, turn on to Main Street, and now I'm at ease, we're having a great conversation, it's wonderful, we've been through so much crazy stuff today, but it's all done, right? And when I least expected it, the car in front of us slammed on their brakes, and I was distracted by the conversation or by the situation, and it was a little bit slippery, so of course, bam, slammed into the car in front of us. Wasn't that hard. I bumped the car, maybe going 5 or 6 k an hour, but I bumped the car nonetheless. So pulled into a parking lot, I followed, and this being, of course, a true Winnipeg story, the person who I rear-ended ended up having to be an old family friend, and somebody that we've known for over years. Checked the cars, no signs of damage, all good. And as it turns out, the parking lot that we pulled into was 200 meters before the street that we were supposed to turn off, so we were so close. So finally, we get out, and I pull down the street and get her to her car at roughly 5:30 in the afternoon. Had she taken the bus, she would have been home shortly after 3. If we'd gotten the right from driving, she would have got home at about 10 to 3. So this wonderful 3-hour trip, we got to know each other very well. And in the end, this 16-year-old who had never had any guts, never asked a girl for her phone number or anything, I think I'd probably been rehearsing this in my head for hours at this point. I said, you know, Hillary, I think we've been through so much together that I deserve your phone number. And she gave me her phone number in the end, and I was just chatting with my wife on the drive over, and I still remember the phone number. I'm not going to say it so that nobody's like, I still remember it. And finally, the epilogue of the story is that absolutely nothing came of it. And that's the end. Thank you all very much.